Brian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to talk about men over 40 and how we can increase their wellness today. But before we kind of get to that, I would love to know a little bit more about you, so there's context for the audience. How did you even become a wellness coach and focus on men over 40?
Yeah, so I've been in health and wellness in the field for like 20 years now, and it was just an interest of mine early on. I don't have some elaborate story about how I lost like 100 pounds, but I've always been interested since high school probably. And when I got out of school, I was in the corporate world, realizing that I didn't want to be in a sedentary in a cube. So that led me to just learning about my passion, which is health and wellness and helping people. And mainly I started off in a studio and doing some training, and then building up from there and just becoming an entrepreneur. And now, do more like, consulting. And so it's sort of been a journey of, from in the studio. Now I do more consulting and work focusing on sort of the holistic point of view, is not more than just resistance training, but other aspects of health as well.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about your approach, right? You do have more of a holistic, whole life approach to health and losing
Sure.
weight. And so talk to me a little bit about your approach.
Yeah, my approach is simply like I have like a 6-step approach, and I can just run through that really quick. Is the first step, what I do with all my clients, is create some type of clarity. And that's mindset work and just getting crystal clear on the individual's why, and then also uncovering these self-sabotage patterns that have happened unconsciously, mind you, for most people, that have sort of been a hindrance to their progress. And so we really get into like that, getting crystal clear on their why. We do like a full baseline assessment as well, and then DEXA scan, and just so, because you got to sort of know where you're coming from, and then you can sort of build from there. And so that's the first step. After that, we focus on what are those sort of low-hanging fruits that can impact an individual's health right away. You got to, I think it's important early on to get small wins and start with those. So that's essentially what we'll do right off the bat, is find those 1 to 3 habits that we can just knock off right away. And it doesn't, that could take 6 months, but we at least we start there and hopefully get those wins right off the bat.
Like, for example, what would be considered a low-hanging fruit habit that is easily to quit? I feel like almost all habits after 40,
Yeah, no, you're right. Right, exactly. Yeah, if they've been doing it for 30 years, it might take 6 months at least to get rid of that habit. It could be as simple as just like, let's just say they don't even have any type of like sleep routine, for example. And they're doing work late, and it's impacting the quality of their sleep. So we'll just build a routine around creating some type of routine, as like, for example, maybe what we'll do is we'll say we'll cut off our work time at like 7 p.m. and make sure that everything we got is done. Avoiding staring at blue light screens, a couple hours before bed, and maybe do some type of reading or meditative work, or so something along those lines. Building routines around that would be one just example.
That's great. And so, what's your step 3?
Step 3 is activity upgrade, and obviously as we age, one of the most important things we can do is just maintain or build strength. And so if an individual has never done that, or on and off done it for the last 30 years or 40 years, I'll try to create some type of program for them. It depends on, the resources they have, but, where they can get something in, 2, 3, 4 times a week. It could be literally 20, 30 minutes. I like these sort of micro workouts. I have few different tools that they can use. Something called an X3 bar, which is like variable resistance with bands as opposed to weights. a little bit easier on the joints. So something like that is step 3.
And then step 4?
Step 4 is, well, we touched on sleep, but it would be sleep. So that would be building a routine if they don't have one already, and sort of understanding what's been sabotaging the quality of the sleep, and maybe a lot of times with males getting up a lot in the middle of the night. And for sometimes, a low-hanging fruit could be just don't drink anything, but like 3 hours before bed,
Right.
and that could go a long way because then you're not getting up as much in the middle of the night. Sometimes easier said than done, but so it'd be creating a simple, manageable routine around sleep.
And then 5 and 6?
5 and 6. 5 is, decreasing stress. Obviously, stress is inevitable, and some stress is good, but this would be just a way for them to have some tools to manage stress. If they've never done anything like breath work or meditation or yoga or things like that, trying to find whatever would fit in their schedule. I mean, literally, it could be a 10-minute yoga class that they do on their laptop or something. I mean, something as simple as that. But I think that, some men are open to that. I would say that, the key for something like that is just the more you do it, the better you get at it. Something like breath work or meditation, it just doesn't happen overnight. So yeah, just building some type of practice to help sort of down-regulate their system.
Right, right. And it's hard for people. I think that's like the biggest issue for most people is just like this
Yeah.
constant state of chronic stress, and then you're so used to it, you don't know how to relax after a while, it's really bad.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of times people rely on just drinking, just to help them settle down, as opposed to, you know, other tools that they could utilize, which would probably be better off than just relying on something to drink.
Right, right. Because then you're dealing, not only you're drinking, now you're dealing with the sugar, and then you just start, people start getting weight because they're drinking and not doing anything. It's like the vicious circle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And what about stage 6 then?
Yeah, so stage 6 would be nutrition, meal timing, and this is obviously just building a sort of an easy, I should say, easy to follow plan for them to utilize just healthy whole foods that just are like geared towards what their goals are, and so it could depend on the individual what that looks like, but yeah, that would be step 6.
So, kind of talking about meal timing and nutrition and that sort of thing, what is it that people are doing wrong for the most part, are you finding? Like, I feel like meal timing is something that's easy or should be easy to kind of adjust, and then trying to, I don't know, I guess, nutrition is a whole other thing, but
Right.
because we're so addicted to sugar, but
Well,
like first addressing the meal timing.
I think the biggest thing that works for a lot of clients, and that's a common issue, is the fact that late night eating, or eating after a certain time period, and because a lot of times if you're eating after 8 o'clock, let's just say, it's snacking on a lot of processed foods, and it's sort of like just boredom eating, or while they're watching TV, it's just sort of become habitual. So I think that just cutting off your eating window, let's just say 7 o'clock, that one action right there can sort of help lead to a big cascade of benefits, not just in avoiding the snacking, but maybe even helping with sleep quality and not eating so close to bed, and just giving you some type of like a boundary with your eating. So
Right.
that's a big one.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
they say that this, they're your extreme intermittent fasters. My husband doesn't start eating until 3 p.m. generally nowadays, every day. And his window is, I would say, probably 5 or 6 hours, between 3 to like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock.
Okay.
For me, that seems impossible. But so I've heard, right? So I also stop eating at around 8 p.m. and then I don't have breakfast until 9 a.m.
Okay.
So that's my intermittent. Like I have to be sleeping if I'm going to fast, I feel like. So tell me, what is your thoughts on intermittent fasting and why do you think it's so effective?
Yeah. So I think some of the reasons why intermittent fasting has become effective for a lot of people is the fact that you're giving your body some relief from just not eating. And this could be in the forms of like gut relief, for example. And so, I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. Also, too, like we talked about before, it just sort of gives you boundaries. Just a simple act of not eating after a certain time period. That first, it puts you in a fasted state, gives you some gut relief, and also, gives your body time to just digest foods before bed. So, I think those are big ones. A lot of the other ones, obviously, you always hear about insulin and getting insulin down. I mean, I think there's some mixed opinions on that. It does do that, and it can get you into a state of, like ketosis after a while. I think like being in that long term could be harmful for people. So, but yeah, I think the biggest thing is it gives people's boundaries, and also too, like you find you're not eating as much. Like I mean, I always say, you want to eat till you're satisfied. You don't want to undereat necessarily, but even just the act of having 6 or 8 hours in an eating window, you'll find that people probably don't eat as much. And so there is a little bit of a restriction as far as calories is concerned. I'm not a big like calorie cutter, but I think it sort of does that secondarily, just because you have less time to eat.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I guess there's a lot of people who are very addicted to processed foods. It's easier. I don't know how to cook, blah, blah. There's always an excuse. And it's just so easily and readily accessible in our supermarkets now. So, like, if you're already intermittent fasting, right, and now you're pretty much eating processed foods all the time because you don't know how to cook or whatever the reason may be, you don't have the time. I guess, it's funny, right? Because they think, oh, I'm eating less, so I must lose weight. But it doesn't necessarily work that way if you're eating out of a box that has like 8,000 ingredients in it, and
Yeah. I
it's not
mean,
all real food.
yeah, I mean, if you're eating processed foods and doing fasting, I mean, I guess that's probably better than eating processed foods all the time,
Right.
right? So I guess that's sort of a net win. But you're missing out on, if you're talking about just optimizing health, you're really, missing out on nutrients, you're missing out on protein, the building block for your body to build muscle and bone strength and things like that. And,
Right. So you're just likely going to gain weight by doing it that, even if you're
I mean,
intermittent fasting.
likely, the thing about it is if you're eating processed foods and you're fasting, you're probably overeating because you're not getting any say that 20 times, satiation from those, lack of nutrients that you're having. So I always tell people they should just, prioritize protein with each meal and focus on nutrient dense foods is the best way to go, because that will also help you when you are not eating, and it'll help you stay full longer.
Right. And so when you're talking about nutrient dense food, what are you talking about specifically? Dark leafy greens? You're talking about, I'm assuming you're also talking about protein, beans,
Sure.
avocados. What do you?
Yeah, I mean, for some people that might look different. For example, like people might be sensitive to beans or leafy greens. If they're not, they could add those in. I think when I think of nutrient dense foods, I think of, I mean, this could be anything from like wild caught cold fish to, eggs to red meat. If they want to do some organ meats from time to time, they could do that. Oysters, things like that. Sardines, mackerels, these are probably where you're getting your best bang for your buck. You could also add in some, chicken and turkey. You just got to make sure get it from the right source. And then you can also add in some cheeses or organic, some dairy. If you could do raw dairy, that would be great, but not everyone has access to that. But also, I'm not opposed to plant foods and adding in some fruit. It's something that I've been adding in. I don't really have a ton of plant foods, but I'll have fruit, and it's easy to digest. You're getting some good fiber, And as long, if you could find some locally grown in season fruits, that would be great.
So what are your thoughts on carbs?
I mean, that's interesting. My thoughts on carbs have changed a bit. I was for a long time I did low carb and fasting for a while, and I have a podcast as well, the Get Lean Eat Clean podcast, and I have quite a bit of different individuals on that podcast. But I've learned that I think carbs are laid out as like the devil, and they're really not. You can lose weight eating carbs. And I think that they can be of benefit if you use them strategically. And so I have been doing that, and I'm finding nothing wrong with having carbs as long as they're in a whole food form. Some people run better with carbs than others, but I think they're made out to be the devil, and they're really not. So I think there's nothing wrong with having them if you could, things like fruit and plant foods, maybe some fermented foods as well. You can, sweet potatoes. So I think they can play a role and help you utilize, using them as a fuel.
But you're talking about whole food carbs as opposed to like white bread or, pasta.
Yeah, that's what exactly. Yeah. Yeah. When you mention carbs, yeah, I'm saying, yeah, you should avoid boxes and barcodes as much as possible. So, the breads, the pastas, the cereals, yeah, those are carbs as well, but I consider those as sort of like the no-go list.
Yeah. But I like the boxes and bars, the type of thing. It's true.
Yeah.
And I think that, something, if you can't pronounce the ingredient, you should not buy it.
Exactly.
And it's kind of scary because I think a lot of diets are very heavy on processed foods nowadays. But so what's happening? Why focus on men over 40? What's happening to men after 40 that you feel that, you need to focus on these guys?
Well, I mean, I think they've been somewhat underutilized. I think what happens sometimes, for a lot of males over 40 is, they stop focusing on themselves, and I'm sure this happens with women as well. And so, they look in the mirror after 30, 40 years of eating a certain way or living a certain lifestyle, and it's taken a toll on them. A lot of times it's in visceral fat around their gut. And so, I think that, it's an opportunity for individuals. Men, don't always ask for help. So I think it's important to know that, they need accountability just as much as anyone else. And so, it's I think it's something that hopefully more men will start prioritizing their health later on. And that's why I sort of created the program.
And you also have a book coming out as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's called the Stepladder System. It's a 6-step sort of process to lifelong health and vitality. And really, honestly, I put the book together because I wanted a way to put my program sort of in like a workbook sort of format for people that I couldn't necessarily work one-on-one with. And so that's pretty much what it is. It literally is my program in this book. And, there's plenty of like things for the individual to check off and do as they sort of go through this book. And I just thought it was an opportunity to help others.
That's awesome. Well, I'll definitely put the link down below or in the show notes, depending on whether you're watching this or listening to this. So Brian, if people want to get in touch with you or find out more about you, where do they go?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can write me a letter. No, I'm kidding. It's like you can go. You could go on my website, briangrin.com, and then I'm on Instagram at bdgrin as well. So those are probably the best two places to start.